Masechet Nazir Daf Kaf Chet. We're going to conclude finally this 5 daf discussion of this halakha l'Moshe Sinai that made a distinction between allocated and unallocated coins. Allocated coins, part of it, that's a chatat, has to be thrown into the Dead Sea, whereas if it's unallocated, then the chatat is mixed in with money that will be for all of the Nazir's korbanot, including ola and shelamim, because unallocated, you can take all the money and you don't have to throw any into the Dead Sea. You can use it all for voluntary communal offerings. All right, that was in the Mishnah, and in the Gemara we were talking about blemished animals. Is that like unblemished animals, and therefore is like it already allocated, or is a blemished animal, since it cannot be sacrificed, is that simply a cash value? We are going to sell them and use the cash, so is that like coins? That was a machloket between Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak and Rav Nachman, and now today we are going to challenge Rav Nachman once more. We will successfully answer it on his behalf. And this challenge comes from a rather long baraita. It's from the second of 4 cases in the baraita. So here we go. Mativ Rava. Korbano. Bekorbanohu yoseh ve'eno yoseh bekorban aviv. Baraita is talking about a chatat offering. A person brings bekorbano. He has to bring his offering. So we learn from this that a person has to bring his own offering for his own sin. And you cannot, for example, take one's father's offering and bring it for himself. If someone's father made a sin, inadvertently ate chaylev, designated a korban, says this will be my chatat, died, and now he doesn't need this korban chatat anymore, and so happens that the son then violates a similar sin, or the same, eats chaylev, or violates Shabbat by mistake, which is also requires a korban chatat. So you might think that maybe the son he inherits it and then he could use it. The answer is no, he cannot do that. Now, let's discuss various scenarios. Maybe there's some possibility. I might think when it says the word korbano in this pasuk, it only is excluding a case where the 2 sins of the father and the son are different levels. For example, if the father ate chelev, which is more minor than violating Shabbat, although they both get a korban hatat, if it's done on purpose, violating Shabbat is sikila, not chelev. So maybe I would have thought that if there's a difference in the severity, that's why a son cannot use the father's korban. Aval yoseh bekorban tefrish aviv min hakala ala kala or min hamura ala hamura. But if let's say they're the same severity or even the very same sin, then maybe the son would be able to use his father's designated korban. Tamud lomar korbano bekorbano yoseh ve'eno yoseh bekorbano shel aviv. That's why he says korbano twice in pasuk 23, again in pasuk 28, to say no, it has to be yours only, and you cannot use your father's, even if it's the same level. Good. That's case number 1. Now, case number 2. Each one is introduced by a theoretical possibility. A person so I might have thought, I understand what you said in conclusion number 1, case number 1, that you cannot use the same korban as your father, even if it's the same type of severity. And that would make sense, because after all, regarding Nazir, now we're comparing a regular chatat, just for eating cheleb, to the chatat of a Nazir, or all the behemot of a Nazir. A person cannot complete his nizirut using his father's animals. If a father was a Nazir and set aside animals for his nizirut, and then he dies without completing his nizirut, a son cannot use those animals. So that makes sense that actual animals designated by a father cannot be used by a son. This is going to be the key to to the question that Rava is setting us up for. Okay, we got that. But regarding Nazir, if a father designated money for his Nazirut Korbanot, and still in cash, and then he dies without completing his Nazirut, a son, as we mentioned yesterday, is permitted to say, you know what, I'll be a Nazir as long as I can use that cash, those coins, to buy my Nazir Korbanot. So, since regarding Nazir, we see a distinction between animals and money, that for money, a son can use the father's money, then I might think that I can transfer the same idea over to the Korban Hatat. Afilu min ha'chamora lakala, or min hakala lachamora, she'ara adam megalech al me'ot aviv bin zirut. So I might think that regarding Hatat, if a father had designated money, they said this money will be for my Hatat because I ate chelev, then the son also, and he dies, then the son also can take that money and use it maybe even for a different sin if he violated Shabbat by mistake. Since, after all, for a Nazir, a son can use a father's money. So this is the theoretical possibility. Side note, regarding Nazir, a son can only use the money that the father designated if they were unallocated funds. He didn't say this is for this korban and that korban, but only if they're mufarashin, he cannot. But if they're unallocated, he said, here's $300 for my korbanot of Nazir, then the son can use it. Okay, but the point is that there is a case where the son can use the money of the father, so I might think also that there is some case where the son can use the money of a chatat that his father had designated. Tamud lomar korbano bekorbanohu yoseh ve'eno yoseh bekorban aviv. That's therefore the pasuk emphasizes korbano. No, it has to be your korban, son, and you cannot use the korban of your father, not even his money that he separated. All right, now we're going to end up asking from this case because it just says animals are not allowed. You cannot transfer an animal from a father to son. Animals are not the same as money. Money you can in a Nazir. A khatat you can't do anything. But for a Nazir, the son can use the money of his father, but he cannot use the animal of his father. So it doesn't say what kind of animal, if it's blemished or unblemished. So it sounds like even unblemished animals are like animals and are not like money. That's going to be Rava's question, and we're going to answer and say, no, maybe it's talking about only unblemished animals. Okay, but before we get to the question, case number 3 of the Braita. Yachol lo yaseh b'ma'ot she'ifrish, afilu min hakala ala kala, min hachamora ala chamora. Aval yoseh b'korban she'ifrish le'atzmo, min hakala ala chamora, min hachamora ala kala. So maybe, okay, I got it. The father, you can't use anything of the father for the son. We established that. All right, so you cannot use money that he from the father, even from the same level, would not be allowed. But here's the third proposition: maybe an animal, right, a physical animal that the son designated for his own sin, and now he wants to use it for a different sin. He ate chaylev, and he designated an animal, and then he violated Shabbat, and he says, you know what, I want to take this animal, and instead of for the chaylev, I want to get something else for the chaylev sin, and I want to use this animal for the Shabbat violation sin, or the other way around. Maybe it's his own, it's korbano, so I might think that that's allowed. Tamod omar korbano al hatato al chia korbano l'shum hato. The pasuk says his korban for his sin, which means that it has to be for that particular sin, and you cannot use a korban that you already designated for a different sin. That's case number 3, and now case number 4. Yachol lo yaseh b'bhema shefrish la'atzmo min hakala lakala o min hachamora lachamora. Afilu min hakala lachamora o min hachamora alakala. Sheken im ifrish b'hema ala cheleb ve'bi al hadam o al adam ve'bi ala cheleb shehare lo ma'al ve'lo kiper. I understand an animal I cannot transfer from one to the other, but we're going to ask about money that the son himself designates for himself. So let's go through the language here. So I understand, right, that an animal itself that he designated for his own sin, whether it be for one light mitzvah for another light, or one stringent for another stringent, or one to the other, cheleb to Shabbat, or Shabbat to cheleb, that I understand a person cannot transfer the animal for a different sin. Why? Because if a person would designate an animal for eating cheleb, and then bring that animal instead for a violation of eating blood, or the other way around. He ate blood, which is not allowed, and he designated an animal, and then when he brought the animal to sacrifice the animal, he brought it instead for a different sin of eating cheleb. So in this case, it doesn't work. The korban chatat does not atone for the sin that he intends it to atone for, right? It was originally designated for cheleb, and he brought it instead for eating blood. It doesn't atone for his eating blood. And how do we know that it doesn't? Because this is related to another halacha of me'ilah. Me'ilah is when someone inadvertently misuses consecrated holy property or money. And so in this case, the person doesn't violate me'ilah. Why? Because he's using something that's holy for a different holy purpose. It was for cheleb, he's using it for dam. So there's no problem with me'ilah. And since there's no problem with me'ilah, that means that me'ilah is only violated if he takes something that's consecrated and uses it for a secular purpose. See, if there was me'ilah, then the way me'ilah works is that if I go and take one of the bowls of the Bet HaMikdash and I use it for my own soup, or take money and use it for my own purposes, the me'ilah violation makes that holy thing chol. So it's not allowed to do, but it makes it chol. So if there was me'ilah, then actually you would atone, because that would mean that I took this animal for chelev, I took it for something else, I made it my own, but then it ends up being a non-holy animal, and then if I then use it for dam, that would work, because now I redesignated, so it would atone for the sin of eating the blood. The fact that I don't violate me'ilah, that means that it does not go from Kodesh to Chol. Since it doesn't go from Kodesh to Chol, it also can't be redesignated for something else. So that's why it doesn't atone for the new sin that I intended it to be. So all that was already established in the third case, and so now the fourth case, we're just bringing a reason for it, and we're bringing the reason because maybe we can distinguish between an animal itself and money as follows. אבל יוצא במעות שהפריש לעצמו מן הקלה לקלה ומן החמורה לחמורה ומן החמורה לקלה ומן הקלה לחמורה. If a person designates money for korban chatat for a certain sin, and then he decides on purpose to change and use that money instead for a different sin, for dam, for violation of Shabbat. So in that case, I might have thought that that would be okay, right? To take an animal that was designated for one thing and to use for another thing, yeah, that for sure is out. But maybe for money, if I separated it for myself for a minor transgression, for another minor, or a stringent for another stringent, or a minor for stringent, or stringent for minor, I might think that if I take that money, purposefully use it for something else, that would be okay. Why might I think so? Because שכן אם הפריש לעצמו מעות מן החלב והביא על אדם והביא על החלב שמעל וכיפר. Because if I do it by mistake, it does work. Right? If I had money that I took designated for chelev, and then I forgot, I don't remember that this $100 I had already designated for chelev, and by mistake I use it for another sin that I made, which is I also ate blood, and I use it for blood, or the other way around. In that case, I committed me'ilah. Me'ilah is only done unintentionally. That's why it's here. Now, when someone commits me'ilah, that means that the money that they misused becomes chol. Now, since he misused it because it was supposed to be for chelev, and now I use it for dam, it becomes chol in the meantime. When I use it for dam, now it becomes holy again. So it atones for the dam. So since money does, in fact, since I do violate me'ilah, that means it becomes chol, and it does then re-atone, and that's all if I use that money by mistake for the wrong purpose. So I might think that also if I misuse the money on purpose, then it would also be the same, and it would atone. Talmud Omar al hatato al shihe kolbano l'shem chet'o, and therefore the pasuk adds a further emphasis and says it has to be for that particular sin, whether it's an animal or whether if it's money or money. I cannot purposefully take money or an animal for one purpose and use it for another. All right, those are the 4 cases of this long baraita, and we brought it all for what we said above. Katene mihat behema, ma'lav afilu ba'alat mum, and it says animal, and the sound doesn't distinguish between blemished and unblemished animal, and so doesn't that mean that regarding Nazir, right, in the second case when it compared to Hatat to Nazir, see for Hatat you can't use anything for anything. There was no room for any reuse in regarding Hatat, but for Nazir, the Baraita did mention that although a son cannot use the animals of his father, he can use the money of his father. It didn't distinguish between what type of animal, and therefore it sounds like even a blemished animal would be like allocated funds, like an animal, and not the same as unallocated funds, which a son can use if the father dies. So this is a challenge to Rav Nachman, and Rav Nachman could answer, Lo timima. No, this Mishnah is in fact talking about an unblemished animal. That's why a son can't use it from the father, because if it's unblemished, it's fit to be sacrificed. So the male is going to be obviously for the olah and so on. Whereas an unblemished animal, in fact, is like cash. That's what Rav Nachman says, and here also the Baraita could very well mean that. So we ask about that. Wait, so you're saying that a blemished animal is like unallocated money? Then why would the Baraita talk about money versus animals? It should make a clearer, a more strict distinction, and say an unblemished animal a son can use that from the father. Unblemished animal is designated. A blemished animal is considered allocated, right? Unblemished animal is not allocated. Blemished animal is considered allocated, right? Make a finer distinction. And the answer is Hachinameh dilmai chazia lidmeh demeh hainu ma'ot. It says you're right. That is in fact what the Baraita means, because these animals that are blemished, what are they good for? What can you use them for? Lidmeh, for their money. And money is the same as ma'ot. So it's the same thing. By saying, when we say ma'ot means money and its equivalent. Anything that is going to be used for its value, including blemished animals. All right. So that whole long question for a short answer. All right. And now we get to the next Mishnah. Nizrak aleha echad min hadamim eno yachol lehafer. A wife declares herself to be a nizirah. The husband apparently doesn't hear about it, doesn't know about it. Maybe she's just growing her hair long. I don't know. He doesn't know about it until it's over. Maybe 30 days, right? 30 days later, let's say. And now she has her sacrifices and she starts bringing them. And already the Kohen takes one of them and sprinkles the blood of one of her sacrifices onto the Mizbeach. And that very day, finally the husband hears about it and he says, wait, stop right there. I want to nullify it. You cannot nullify it. It's too late, right? It's already finished. You can't nullify it when it's already done. And the second that, so when really the question is when is a nizirut finished, completed? So once the blood of the animal is sprinkled on the Mizbeach, that's it. The nizirut is finished, so the husband cannot nullify it anymore. Rabbi Akiva omer, afilu nishchata alea achat mikol habehemot eno yachol lafer. Rabbi Akiva says, no, you don't have to wait till the blood is sprinkled, which is the final step of an offering, even after the first step of an offering. The first step is the shechita of one of the first of the animal that you bring. From that point on, he cannot nullify it anymore. Now, even though at this point her nizirut is not over, she still can't drink wine. So there is something to annul, right? The thing with Tanakama is that once it's over, she can drink wine. So what are you annulling? So even though at this point it's not completely done, she's still prohibited. Nevertheless, Rabbi Akiva, as the Gemara will explain, is worried about what you're going to do with this korban. You already did shechita, and now all of a sudden you're going to annul it. And now retroactively, she was not a nizira, or from now on she's not a nizira, and so now she doesn't need this korban anymore. So now you have a korban midway not needed. You're wasting a korban. So this is a problem. Okay, so that's the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. Now, when do we have this machloket about whatever the time is, beginning or end of the korban, that he cannot nullify it anymore? That's only betiglah hatahora. That's only regarding the ending shaving. She finished her pure days, 30 days, let's say, where she was a nizira the whole time without becoming teme'ah, and now these are her ending korbanot. So it's about to end. That's why the husband cannot annul it. Aval betiglah hatatumah yafer shu yachol lomar EFC be'isha menuvelet. But let's say it's midway through, and she became tememet after 10 days, and she brings her korbanot, also 3 korbanot, but different ones, because she became tameh, and she's going to restart. Even after she brought those korbanot, the husband can nullify. Why? Because he can say, I don't want EFC be'isha menuvelet. I don't want a wife who is, usually menuvelet means disgusting, ugly to me. And in this case, because she's a nizira, she's not drinking wine, so they're not going to be able to have a drink together. He's not going to be able to cheer her up, and she's going to be unappealing to him. So he has a right to annul her vow, right? This is something that will affect their relationship, and so he can do it even though she brought these 3 korbanot of restarting. All right, but at the end, then she can start drinking wine, or almost drink wine, it'll be just a few minutes even for Rabbi Akiva, so then he cannot annul it. Now, Rabbi Meir omer, af betiklachat hatahora yafer, sheyachol lomar EFC be'isha megulachat. Rabbi Meir says, disagrees with all the above, and says even in the final shaving process, when she completed all her days of being pure and being nizira, he can still annul it even after she brought all of her sacrifices and they were sprinkled. And at that point, she can drink wine. So then what would be the point of annulling it? Because it says, it still affects me. I don't want a wife with a shaven head, right? Because even though she's not a nizira anymore, she can drink wine and all that, but the final step is she has to shave her head. I'm not going to be attracted to my wife if she shaves her head. And it affects me, it affects our relationship, and therefore he says, you know what? I'm undoing her nizirut. She's not a nizira, and at that last moment, she won't have to shave her head. And so, since it still affects him, the Bible says he can still annul it. All right, fascinating Mishnah. Now, matnitin de lo Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Eliezer ha matiglachat me'akebet. וכיוון דגלה גילחה אסירה בחמרה, וכיוון דאית לה ניבול מעשה מפר. Our Mishnah, the Tanakama of our Mishnah, is evidently not the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, because if it were to be Eliezer, Rabbi Eliezer says that a final step of shaving is necessary. She doesn't stop being a Nazirah. So all the prohibitions apply until all the way at the end when she shaves her head. And as long as she doesn't shave her head, she is prohibited to drink wine. And so since there is something unappealing to her husband if she doesn't drink wine, then Tanakama should agree that it's not over till it's over. It's not over till till she shaves, and so that means even for however long that is, that few minutes after she sprinkles the wine and before she shaves, she's still in Nazirah, still not drinking wine, so still unappealing. So according to the Rabbi Eliezer, the Nizirut doesn't stop at the sprinkling. That's different from Tanakama. Ubehapeligi, and here would be the essence of their machloket. Tanadidan savar kevan dezrik al adam lealtar sharia bechamra v'hadet lenivul. The Tanakama of our Mishnah says, once you sprinkle the blood of the sacrifice, immediately she's permitted to drink wine, and therefore there's nothing that's going to be unappealing to him. Rabbi Akiva sabar afilu ishtechitat behema eno yachol lafer mishum hefsed kodashim. At Rabbi Eliezer, obviously we just said, he said he can annul it until the time of the shaving of the head, because she still can't drink wine. In the end, that will be similar to Rabbi Meir, although for a different reason. Whereas Rabbi Akiva, he says earlier, because once you did shechitan the behema, we don't want him to annul it anymore, because then we're going to have this consecrated animal, and it's going to be lost. We're going to have to destroy it. We can't use it. You started with a korban, you did shechita, so it's proper to finish it. Now, it could be b'diavad once you even after you did shechita, if he annuls it, could very well be that the annulment will work. In fact, they shouldn't even say it will work. But we don't want him to. And so the rabbis say, don't do that, because we don't want to waste a good korban. Now, challenge to Rabbi Akiva's explanation here. Matkif la Rabbi Akiva. Ve'amai lizrok taman shelo lishman v'yatir basar achila. Wait, so what? So she's not a Nazira anymore. So we just go ahead, go through with the korban anyway. And you can throw the blood, even though it's not for a Nazir anymore, and permit, let's assume it's the Shelamim offering, and permit the flesh to be eaten, right? Because so just go through it anyway. It won't be for a Nazir, so it'll be just a regular voluntary Shelamim offering. Mila Tanya kibse aseret sheshachatan shelo lishman או ששחטן לפני הזמנן או לאחר זמנן הדם יזרק והבשר יאכל. After all, we have a braita regarding the sheep that we bring on Shavuot. We bring 2 sheep with the 2 loaves of bread, and if someone took those very sheep and did shechita, having the wrong intention, not thinking that this is for the kibseh aseret, the ones for the holiday, but just for any other type of shelamim. Those kivasim are shelamim, but he did it for a regular shelamim, just a voluntary one. Or he did it the wrong day. For some reason, he took the sheep meant for Shavuot, Vav Sivan, and he did it a day earlier or a day later. In all those cases, you continue with the process, you sprinkle the blood anyway, and the meat is permitted. And so it's fine. Now, you're not going to fulfill your mitzvah of kivseh aseret if you have the wrong intention, but the sacrifice is still kosher. Furthermore, the Braita continues and says, V'im hayta Shabbat lo yizarek v'im zarak kursa laktir emurin la'erev. If it happens to be Shabbat, that the person that they take these animals that are meant to be kivseh aseret, and one sacrifices them for the wrong intention on Shabbat. You see, if it is Shavuot on Shabbat, and one has proper intention, then it's permitted. You're allowed on Shabbat to sacrifice, even though it's melacha, you're allowed to sacrifice any animals that you have to bring on that day, like Korban Tamid, Korban Musaf, and any animals that are necessary for a holiday. However, if it's, let's say, the wrong day, right, because let's say Shavuot is on Sunday and you're bringing it on Shabbat, or with the wrong intention, in which case this does not fulfill the obligation for kibseh aseret, in that case, lo yizarek, then, and you did shechita, with the wrong intention or wrong day, you did shechita, you're not allowed to do shechita on voluntary shelamim, on Shabbat, right? You can't violate Shabbat if you don't have to. And now, if you did, then do not sprinkle the blood. Don't go through with it. Just leave it as is. Because by sprinkling the blood, you're taking this animal that's currently prohibited and making it permitted. A shelamim offering, all offerings, once they're designated, are prohibited while they're alive. only after you do shechita and sprinkle the blood, then shelamim becomes permitted. On Shabbat, you're not allowed to take something and change its status and make it something that's from unusable to usable, unedible to edible. And so that's why lecha techila, you're not allowed to sprinkle the blood. However, ve'im zara, kursa lektir emurin ha'erev. If for some reason this kohen, he didn't know what was going on, and he did shechita on this animal with wrong intention on the wrong day, and then not only that, he also sprinkled the blood, then it's an acceptable offering. And the leftover parts, the insides, don't burn it on Shabbat, because you don't have to burn it on Shabbat. Wait till Saturday night and burn them afterwards. What do you see here? Again, even on Shabbat, and certainly during the week, if one makes a sacrifice with wrong intention, if it's a shelamim, so go ahead and continue the process, even though it's not going to fulfill the main obligation that you brought it for because you had wrong intention. Nevertheless, it's still it's still okay, and still is a proper kosher korban, and you can eat the food. Therefore, question to Rabbi Akiva: if a wife had her first animal for her nezirut, and she does shechita, and then she did shechita, she didn't do sprinkling yet, and the husband wants to annul it. So let him annul it. What are you worried about? That you're wasting an animal? Don't waste it. Just continue and sacrifice it. And so there won't be any problem. So it'll be a regular communal offering, a regular individual offering, a voluntary offering. So that's just fine. That's not going to waste. That's the question to this reasoning of Rabbi Akiva. So, Amre, and the answer is, you're right. If the first thing that he slaughtered, if it would have been an olah or shelamim, then you're right. Even though he brought the shelamim for the sake of the Nazirut, she brought it, but it turns out now she's no longer a Nazirah. Okay, so you'll continue and bring it as just a regular shelamim offering, which is kosher. It's not going to waste. Same for olah. No one's going to eat it, so it'll just be an extra olah offering. Rather, we're talking about here a case where they bring the hatat first. That's the first one. And since the hatat is first, a hatat that's made for no reason, because it's not necessary, a superfluous chatat, the owner doesn't need it anymore, you cannot just bring a voluntary chatat, and that will go to waste. And that's what Rabbi Akiva was worried about. That's what he's thinking of. And that's why he says, in that case, a husband cannot annul the vow after shechita. Kedetnan, im gilech alachat misheloshtan, yasam. This is a Mishnah from later on in Perek Vav. We only quote a small snippet from the Mishnah here, but the full Mishnah says that how would a person bring his korbanot? He would bring chatat, olah, ushlamim, which means the general order is chatat first. And so when Rabbi Akiva says after the first one is you do shechita, he can no longer annul it. Rabbi Akiva is assuming that the first one is in fact a korban chatat. And that's why he said the first one, korban chatat, no more annulling, because then the korban chatat will go to waste. All right, so now we understand Rabbi Akiva much better. All right, we continue with the Mishnah. So the Mishnah clarified and said the discussion above, there's two opinions above, were only regarding the ending ceremony. Then the husband can't do it anymore. But if it's just the mid-ceremony because she came tameh lamet, then the husband can annul it, because he says, I don't want my wife to continue to be prohibited to drink wine and thereby be unappealing to me. However, Rabbi Akiva says even after the korbanot are done, the husband can still annul it, even though she can drink wine at that point, because he doesn't want his wife to be her head to be shaven, and she won't. That will be unattractive to him. Okay. V'tanakama amalach efshar b'pe'ah nochrit. So Tanakama, how come Tanakama is not worried about that? And Tanakama says, no, after the sprinkling of the blood, that's it. Then the husband cannot annul it, because she can drink wine. And Tanakama is not worried about how she's going to look after her head is shaven. How come he doesn't worry about that? Because Tanakama said she can wear a wig. Pe'ah nochrit, pe'ah means like pe'ot, and nochrit means a foreign, so someone else's hair. And so she can wear a wig, and she'll look just fine. It won't be unappealing. It won't be something that will be a hardship for her. So that's fine. Whereas Rabbi Meir says, no, putting on a wig, it's dirty. It's smelly. You know, how do you wash it? I don't know how they made their wigs and how they put them together. But it's a smelly item, and therefore he's not going to like the wig. That's not a good solution. He has a right to say, I don't want my wife to shave her head, and her wearing a wig is not going to make it better. So he has a right to nullify it all the way until the end. All right, and next we'll end with a Mishnah that actually we already studied, was quoted before. Ha'ish madiret beno ben Nazir ve'en isha madiret et benah ben Nazir. A father can make a Nazirut vow for his son, right? My son is going to be a Nazir, whereas a mother cannot do that. Kesad, gileach o shegilechuhu kirovav, micha o shemichu kirovav. This kesad is not explaining how he becomes a Nazir, but rather the opposite, how he undoes his Nazirut if his father designates him as a Nazir. And one option is that he shaves his head, or another relative shaves his head, or he says, I don't want to be a Nazir, or one of his relatives says, no, sorry, Dad, we don't want this kid to be a Nazir. So any of those options will stop the Nazirut. Hayta lo behema mufreshet hachatat tamut va'ola tikrab ola ushlamim yikrebu shelamim v'nechalin liyom echad ve'enan te'unin lechem. If this son, the father said, I'm going to make you a Nazir, and then they had animals that were set aside, allocated for his eventual ending. So now a relative came, or he himself objected and said, I don't want to be a Nazir. What are you going to do with these animals that were already dedicated? So the hatat, you have to starve it to death, because, as we said, a hatat that's designated for one purpose, you cannot use for anything else. Olah, however, you can make it a korban olah. It's not for a Nazir, so it'll just be a voluntary korban olah. And shilamim, you can make it a voluntary korban shilamim, although the laws of shilamim will be a little different, whereas a regular voluntary shilamim can be eaten for a day, a night, and a day. The one for a Nazir can only be eaten during the day. That's it, not even into the night. So this shilamim, it retains a little bit, some of the laws, this one law from like a korban Nazir, even though it's not for a Nazir. On the other hand, it does not require to bring bread. A Nazir shelamim, he has to bring bread, loaves with it, whereas a regular shelamim not so. So this is like a regular shelamim, and you don't have to bring the bread that a Nazir would have to bring. Now, if same scenario, the father made the son a Nazir, and now this time they separated money, unallocated. All this $300 would be for all of your korbanot. And now he's no longer a Nazir because he objected. So you take the money and it will be donated to the Bet HaMikdash for extra communal voluntary offerings whenever the Mizbeach is empty and free. We don't want it to just be idle, so we'll bring these extra korbanot. However, ma'ot mefurashim, if we had money that was allocated, this $100 and this $100 is going to be for each of the korbanot, then the one that's for a chatat, you can't use for anything else, throw it into the Dead Sea. Lo nehenin velo mo'alin, one is not allowed to benefit from it. If one did benefit from it, then it's not considered me'ilah. Now, how come there's no violation of me'ilah if a person should take this money and use it for himself to just go buy clothes? The answer is because a korban hatat, if it's an actual animal that's going to be sacrificed on the Mizbeach, there is me'ilah if one misuses it. However, this money is not going to be used to buy an animal that's going to go on the Mizbeach. The money is going to be thrown into the Dead Sea because it's not eventually going to be for the Mizbeach. There's no problem, there's no violation of me'ilah. You're not allowed to use the money, obviously, but if one does, one would not be in violation of me'ilah, which has stringent consequences. Now, the money that was the money that was for an olah, you can bring an olah, and that money, if one misuses it, there is me'ilah. Just like any korban olah, if you misuse it, so to the money also, that would violate me'ilah. Whereas the money for shelamim, you would bring a communal shelamim, you would bring a voluntary shelamim offering, and that would have the status of something in between. It would be like a korban of a Nazir in that you can only eat the meat for one day, but unlike it in that, it does not require bread. Also, there will be no me'ilah for the money, just like a shelamim animal would not have a violation of me'ilah while the animal is alive, but rather only after it is slaughtered. So that's the law for a shelamim. That's the end of the Mishnah. We will analyze it further tomorrow. Here are a couple of pictures of ancient wigs. So they definitely did have wigs in those days, but I imagine their quality was not quite up to par for today. The note here explains that the craftsmanship of making a wig was not very advanced, and so the way the wig was put together, since it was somewhat loose, people would avoid washing it often. Otherwise, the hairs would come out. Because they didn't wash this hair often, that's why it smelled bad, and they would have to put perfume on top of it. Okay, so that makes sense why people would not want to use wigs. And this would not be a compensation for the husband having to see his wife bareheaded, and which explains the Zohama right here. Baruch Adonai Leolam, Amen ve'amen.